stand here. So when I went back, it was still off, and I left the light there, it was still
Bonjour.
the whole
I am not very tall, so you'll probably be hearing a voice from behind the stand. It gives me great honor to be standing here in front of you. That Native education, Aboriginal education, or even Indian education, whatever you call it, has really come a long way. I am 71 years young, and I just retired from a long term of teaching, most of it at Lakehead University last year. And so I thought, lots has happened, let the young people pick it up from here. I've done my work. And I know there's a lot more to do. But I thought I would share with you some highlights of following Native education or Aboriginal education along its path. When I look around, I probably have taught a few people here. Wherever I go, I do run into students. Some of them at the casino. If you ever get lonely and you want to see somebody, you go there. My life in education started in the 60s when there was nothing happening in Native education. I went back to school as a young mother of 3 children, and I remember having a devastating problem with marriage and things weren't working out, so I told my father, it was men that you talked to at that time, Dad, I'm going to leave my husband and go back to school. He said, you can't do that. You've made your bed, now you gotta lie in it. And this was the early 60s. I said, but Dad, I can change the sheets, can't I? So in the last 50 years, I've been changing a lot of sheets here and there. They needed to be. I went back to school as a mother. At that time, adults didn't go back to school with the high school students, but I only looked about 18 or 17, and nobody ever asked me about my family life. So I went back to school and discovered that there wasn't anything for Native education, just keep on going. But anyway, in the 60s, people got interested. It was called Indian education then, and we used to meet at the Native Friendship Center. Go and meet there and talk about Native education or Indian education, see where we can go. We had trouble with the name Indian education because whenever we put the sign up Indian education, lots of Indians came out, West Indians, East Indians, and we told them, this is not for you, this is for Canadian Indian. And we got to do some work here. So, okay, they said, and they went their own way. We held meetings around the city and even outside. I remember going to Lake Helen for a meeting. Several of us went and discussed. That's all we did was discuss and talk. And nothing really happened till 1972 when the National Indian Brotherhood came out with their policy statement. This is what began a lot of our work, giving us the thrust to push us forward and work with it. Because in there, the National Indian Brotherhood got together with parents and teachers and so on, and to discuss Indian education, what they wanted, what they would like to see done and where to go from there. And I thought, great, these people know what they're talking about. When I graduated from Teachers College in 1969, I decided to make a break and go and teach non-Native children and get my teaching certificate. So I took a job with the Peterborough Separate School Board. And first thing I noticed with the history books is that Native education wasn't, it just talked about how Indians killed the poor settlers and made life miserable for them. So the first thing I did that in grade 7 was I tossed the history book out the window and did a 2-week unit on Native education or Indian education. So I had grade 7 and 8, and I talked about what Native people did nowadays and what they were doing and what they're hoping for. So we talked about the contributions of Native people. And I remember my mom would send me mugs she made and Native materials, and that's how she fed us 12 children. I was the oldest of 12 children. And I learned through my parents and grandparents certain things, like it wasn't told, well, this is what you gotta learn. It just by showing me the way. And I noticed that Native children learn by watching and listening. They listen to stories. And part of my training began as a teacher when I was 5 years old. My mom would say, take your little brothers out and go and tell them some stories. So I'd make a little circle of 4 brothers and a little sister. And then I would tell them stories of my life, of my 5 years of life experience. And these children grew up to become good storytellers too. Whenever we get together, the brothers start telling stories, and we just sit back and we laugh. So when I began teaching, I taught all non-Native children, and I thought, well, what can I do here that's going to make a difference, but it won't alarm the parents that a Native teacher is coming to teach their children. So for 2 years, I did that by example, and so the main thing that came to me as a teacher, though, that all children are special, and you got to meet their needs. So anyway, we talked about the North American Saints and how we were blamed at residential school. Hey, you people did this to the North American Saints. And I looked up at the painting, and all these white people were all going to heaven on the clouds, and I thought, my goodness, what did my people do to them? So every year we'd celebrate North American Saints Day, and we'd have to get on our knees and ask for forgiveness. It wasn't until I learned in history, and I learned this from a Mohawk elder, that history books didn't portray Native people like they should, that there's 2 sides to every story. So I found out about that, and I shared that with my students. But in the spring, we took a field trip to the village of St. Marie, and all my kids were herded into a cathedral. And the priest said was, welcome everybody. I'm glad you've come to visit us at village of St. Marie. We're going to find out what those darn Indians did, those Crees and those Ojibways and those Mohawks. But the real true Native people at that time were the Hurons. They listened to the priests, and they decided to become Christians. And so anyway, these other natives are lazy and no good for nothing. And my students turn around and went, oh! I says, don't say anything. They expected me to run up there with my tomahawk and bash them in the head, I guess, I says, we'll talk about this in school. and why it's what they're saying, why they're saying it. So I spent 3 years teaching non-native children, and I learned a lot from them too. And I learned to teach children, no matter what skin color they were. Then I went back to university and got my degree because you made more money as a teacher if you had your degree. Then I went back home to teach Indian Affairs. You don't want to go there. So why not? It's my hometown. Well, there's nothing happening there. Well, I says, somebody's got to go and start things up. So I went, and I heard one of the little guys saying, Dolores is coming back to teach. Now we're going to learn something. And so anyway, I got into the classroom, and I soon learned that it wasn't a teaching job I was taking on. I was going to become the social worker, the nurse, mothers, mother of all children, and a teacher, and also the recreation leader. So I started a whole bunch of things happening in the community with the students. And I put things out there to make them proud that they were Native people. Always be proud of being a Native person. You can't change your skin color. Nobody was wishing to be white. Be proud of who you are. And my parents are happy. They never interfered with what I was doing in the classroom. So after that, the only problem I had with teaching in my own home was I was teaching my own son. And he was in grade 4, and the children I was teaching were supposed to be in grade 3 and 4, but they couldn't even read Mr. Muggs. And here Eli was reading at a grade 4 level, so I put him in a corner and gave him lots of work. That presented a problem for my son. He later resented school because it took him away from his mom. Because at home he'd say, "Teacher, can I have a glass of milk, please?" He didn't know if I was his mother or teacher. But I worked with him for the year, and I worked with the Native students. And we had to go over English, the sound system, so they could learn how to read. They say, "Da, these, those, them, mother, father, brother." Then they'd read how they heard that sound. So I practiced the TH sound. And one little boy was so frustrated. He says, "Teacher, how come we have to learn the white man's language?" And I thought, that's a good question. And his brother happened to drive by on a skidoo, and I said, "Isn't that your brother out there?" And he says, "Yep." I said, "Well, just think. I bet you'd rather be out there than in here learning the, these, those, them." He said, "Yep." Well, the reason you have to learn the white man's language is someday you will finish school, you'll learn English, and you'll get a good job with paying money. And then, you know, your brother won't be the only one out there skidooing. You can go out there and buy skidoos from your family, and you can all be skidooing. Doesn't that sound good? He says, "Yep." So he practices the, these, those, them. He was 12 years old at the time. Well, 25 years later, I went to the Prospector for dinner, and there he was, sitting with his wife and 2 teenagers. And he said, "Hi," he says, "Teacher, my family's taking me out for birthday supper. And guess what? These 2 have skidoos." So he had learned something from my advice. Well, in 1975, after teaching a year in Gull Bay, which is my home reserve, I decided to go back for the sake of my children, go back and find a job. And the Native Teacher Ed program opened up. And at that time, I was one of the few people running around with a degree and a teaching certificate. I walked in, I said, "You need any help?" He said, "We sure do. Stay." So I got a job without even going through the interview process. And so we ended up with 36 students coming in that fall. And we had to learn from scratch. What are we going to teach them? How are we going to teach them? You looked around and resources were so few. And this was 1975. But the one thing that came out was the Indian Control of Indian Education, 1972. That was a great document. I found that in Manitoulin Island, West Bay had a cultural center. So we ordered a bunch of posters and things from there. Then we had to go and teach our students how to become teachers of Native children. There was a lot of firsts of the kind because we didn't have guidance. We had to do what we had to do. And I just remembered from being taught on the reserve by my parents and grandparents how things were done. Native children learn by watching, and they learn by listening. And I still see that today. When adults are sitting around talking, the little children are sitting there listening, taking it all in. I have a great grandson. He's 5 years old. Boy, he takes everything in. He always asks questions, and he tells us things at times. They're so smart today. He's into his laptop already. But anyway, so I spent a few years at Lakehead University wondering, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? I was told I had to counsel Native student teachers. And I had to learn that I just couldn't tell them what to do. I had to give them ideas and suggestions. So I would tell a problem about how to deal with wife abuse at that time. Spousal abuse was great, and I had come through that. And I would have to tell them 4 stories. Then I'd have to give them a choice of what to do. First story about would be a woman who left her husband, took her children, got an education. And that was my story. Then I told the story about my sister, 28 years old with 5 children, who was beaten to death. But she felt she couldn't get out of her situation. She only had grade 8. I had at least grade 11 that, pushed me to go back to school. Then I would tell a story about a woman who has a drinking husband, and she goes to Al-Anon, that they can help her. Then I'd tell a 4th story about a woman who goes to Al-Anon, pushes her husband to AA, and together they can resolve their little difficulties. So 4 stories, so I soon learned to become a storyteller. Got a problem? I'll tell you 4 stories. And I looked around the schools. There was nothing happening. So I visit the schools. I take some Native artifacts, take them to the school, and teach these children that not all Indians live in teepees and ride their horses and build totem poles. That's their stereotype. So I started going and doing a lot of storytelling. There's about 14,000 children that grew up learning about Native studies. Then I had to turn around and say, what can we do for the teachers? The teachers had their own ways of teaching the children, teach them all alike. And we had to do some teacher training. We did this out of volunteer time. There were several of us that would meet at least once a month, and then we'd visit schools and we'd do workshops. Then we got some help. With this Indian Control of Indian Education, the PONA documents came out in full force, beautiful documents, but nobody knew what to do with them. So we started to teach courses at the university for the student teachers. First of all, I said all teachers need a course, so I pushed the dean to let us teach contemporary issues in Native education. So I designed the course with 2 other people, Harold Linklater and Dr. Don Power. And so the 3 of us offered it to the non-Native students every year. And 3 of us taught it for several years together. And then after that, things started to happen. Especially with the Lakehead Board of Education, I volunteered to sit on the committee and include them. They started to do things for our students because we kept putting in their ear, do something about Native education, do something for those children, do something different, special. So they did, and we worked with them for quite a few years. Then it was found that Native language was important to teach. It became teachable. Teachers had to take certain courses as teachables, and all the head courses like English and science and all, they're all teachables. So then Native Studies became a teachable. In 1999, teaching grade 9 and 10 became teachable. So did Native language. And we opened up the Native language teacher education program at LU. And by the way, LU was the start of the first Native teacher ed in Ontario, and then Native language. Then in 2000, the senior document came out for teaching Native studies. So we had tools to work with. So we developed courses, the first of its kind in all of Ontario, like how to teach seniors Native studies, how to teach students Native language, how to teach the junior high school program. So we developed courses left and right. And another course came out called Teacher of Native Children. Aha, I said, we need that to teach teachers out there. So I asked the dean if I could go ahead and plan it. He says, go ahead. So I planned it. So Lakehead was the first university to start a Teacher of Native Children. And I'd have teachers coming in the summertime for AQ qualifications. And so I was always had my foot in the doorway to try something new and to follow through on it. So Teacher of Native Children was on every summer, and we have new courses now, and people were interested. So I thought, well, we're going to have to go forward and push a little harder at the Lakehead board. So we did, and they offered Native language. The one that I liked was teaching Native students the Native language, bring them in at supper, feed them, keep them for 3 hours, and give them a certificate at the end of the year in their first year of high school. So this is grade 8, so they enjoyed doing that. And then Native language programs started up in the different schools. So next thing we know, we have a Native education committee going with the Lakehead board. And so the Lakehead board say, what else can we do? There's lots you can do, I told them. And so we sat with them once a month, we'd meet, and they would listen to us, and some of the things that they did were great. Like, for instance, with the teachable courses, I instructed the director. She said, Dolores, what can we do? She's I'm the new director of Lakehead Board. What can we do to help you people? I says, offer Native studies. Don't we do that now? I said, it's teachable, but nobody's offering it in Ontario. Really? She said, I'll look into it. Next thing you know, this was June, she talked to me. In September, she offered the first Native Studies teachable course in her schools. And she kept coming to visit me. What else can we do? Lots, I said. I was trying to get Native teachers in the system. They got a Native education committee going. It's called the Aboriginal Education Advisory Committee, and it started in 2006. So we began sitting down with them and planning things. And one of the things they came up with was a resource book for all teachers, and that got adopted by many people. was only $4 to publish, so we got to publish a lot. And then I adopted it as a Native Studies booklet for my students at LU for teaching Native Studies. And so that was popular. They put that out, and we started, well, in the beginning, there was nobody doing anything with parents. Parents are afraid to approach a principal and teacher about problems with their children. So I used to go out with them, let's go and talk to the principal and the teacher, and we'd resolve difficulties. Now our Lakehead board is going to develop a program for people to help parents. You just have to call, they'd have somebody go with them. And so they're offering Native classes now in the school, and still no Native teachers. But there's still lots of work to do, I thought. And with the teachables coming out, we need training at the Faculty of Education. So I remember Dr. John Stapleton that gave me permission to start Contemporary Issues Native Education. It was a course that people could take on to their studies. Then Dr. Julia O'Sullivan came along, really a feisty little lady. She found out that they were trying to push Native education, so did she. She made Aboriginal education the first year. 4 of us taught it, all the students in the auditorium. And then the next year she made it compulsory. The first university to make Native education compulsory for everyone. And lots of students, 70% of them came from Southern Ontario, said, why do we have to take this? We don't have Native kids in the classroom. I says, you won't recognize a Native child. They're not all brown skinned and dark hair. I says, some are red hair, blue eyes, and freckles, and blonde hair, and they all come from different factions. We had the Métis children out there. Then we had an Inuit student in Thunder Bay. So I says, they're all coming out now. So those people were considered under Aboriginal issues. And so they accepted it, but we still have to talk to every student every year. This is compulsory. So they went out there recognizing that Native children had special needs. They did. They learn differently. They communicate differently. And their interests are different too. And parents are getting interested in Native education. It's time to get involved. So anyway, we worked hard with Aboriginal education. And the name came funny. I said first it was Indian education, then Native education. Now it's Aboriginal studies. They still haven't changed the teachables. They're still Native studies. So education had come a long way, and I was glad to see it coming. And we did everything we can to grab a moment, an inch or two. They developed programs. They developed resource booklets. Like today, there's a lot out there compared to the day that I came along, and there wasn't anything. And my heart beat, and I traveled a lot, talked to people, pushed things. And so today we have a Native Education Conference, and I'm glad to see you're all here. And go back and carry on the work you're doing. We need a lot more work. For instance, we need to see our own people working in the system. We need to see Native teachers. And because at my time, you didn't see anybody Native working at all, period. When I first saw my Native waitress, oh, jumping up and down, great. Then I saw a Native banker, then a Native bus driver. So people started to come out. Then Native organizations came along to Thunder Bay, And at one time when I started, there was 900 of us. 900, we all knew each other. Today I understand there's about 22,000 Native people living in the city, and we don't all know each other. But there are things happening, programs are happening, and there's people out there that are working. I remember one of my little students got her PhD, and she didn't use her PhD, like she's working for the Lakehead Board. And I told the Lakehead Board, this young lady needs to use her doctorate. She earned it, and she shouldn't be made to feel like she can't use it in a classroom. So next time I saw her, I said, you use your name. You showed us the way, like you got your PhD, you worked hard for it, you deserve to use it. So don't be ashamed of it. You worked hard for it, and you use your name. And she's the one that's revamping this copy. We're going to revise it, and she's working with the board. She's working with Native parents, and she was my teaching assistant one year at the university, and I love her to pieces. And that's Dr. Amy Farrell. Her last name, she got married. Just can't remember it now. That's a senior moment I'm having, okay? Forgive me. We get them a lot. I met a pal one day in a grocery store. I started telling him the story. Halfway through, I forgot. So then he says, I'll tell my story. Halfway through his story, he forgot his story. And so then mine kicked in. So we went on our way. I says, I hope that don't happen too many times. But there's so much stuff into our heads in the last 70 years. I can't remember. I'll remember faces though. People come up and say hello. So where do I know that person from? Where did I teach that person? But anyway, yes, our children are getting out there. They're getting Native studies. Still a lot more to happen. They need to see Native people in the school. And the one Catholic high school had a Native care worker out there. She talked to everybody, and that's good. They had a Native language teacher. Wouldn't let the students speak English at all in the classroom. She was really good with her language class. And Native teachers, though, we need to see them. I remember about more than 50 years ago, 60 years ago, we had a Native teacher. I thought, wow. I used to follow around his little footsteps and look at him. He made it, and he taught, but he didn't push Native education. It was unheard of in those days. But I did get to meet and talk to him because his daughter came through my program. And she said, my father's a teacher. And I said, who's that? And I knew who she was talking about. I had a chance to talk to him. And we talked for hours, and the hardships he had going to teachers college. He had to walk from the Fort William Reserve to get the bus and then get to school. And I had a really interesting talk with him. So we have lots of teachers out there. We have lots of Native language teachers. We need to push the program in all the boards of education. The Lakehead Board of Education is looked to by other boards in Ontario. They come and ask permission. Can we borrow your booklet? Can we work on it? And they look to them for advice on what to do. And so things are out there now, and we can use them, and we can promote more work and develop textbooks that our students can use. And maybe my great-grandson will benefit by that. I remember one day he was outside, he was so smart, he can read and ask questions. He's standing outside with everybody, and they saw an unidentified flying object up in the air. They said, I wonder what's that? Kingston looked up. He said, that's a satellite. It beams down information to us. So he walks into the house. They all look at this 5-year-old going up the steps. He's telling the adults what to do and what life is about. So I was told that I'd to give some time for questions and so on. I might have missed a few things. I went through the 60s and then the 70s when the PONA documents came out, the 80s when native language came out and native teacher education courses, and then the 90s, the native studies documents came out. I'll show you them quickly. We need support out there from the boards of education. Push them in your areas to do that, because we're doing it here in Thunder Bay. And we started it all at Lakehead U in Thunder Bay. And that's 50 years ago. So a lot has come under, and I can sit back in my rocking chair, and if I don't flip over, I can reminisce about where we're at in Native education. So I'm not going to talk your ear off, but I'll share one more story. I kept pushing Native studies in the schools. Well, one day this young lady came up to me and she said, "Professor Bobby, I'd like a letter of recommendation. I want to teach up north." "Why?" I said. Because she says, "I like Native people." "Why?" "Because I learned about Native people in this course just recently." "Why? What prompted you to take this Native Studies course?" "Well, when I was in grade 2, she says, this Native teacher came along and talked to us about Native people and their contributions. And ever since that time," she says, "I've been so interested." And I said, "Where was that?" She said, "At Sherbrooke." She was in grade 2, so that's where I started teaching my Native studies. And she was now a grown-up, graduating out of Teachers College. I thought, wow, I used to wonder how much influence can I give to people? And it does, just one little bit, a little deaf ear, I heard it, and now she's back wanting to teach Native children. And we need people to develop curriculum. We need people to get out there. We need parents interested in the education of their children. And my son is 50 now. He calls me mom, no longer teacher. But that was his experience. Okay, so I'm going to leave space for questions.
Okay, so if everybody has questions for Dolores, please come up to the microphones and just state your name and what community you are from. Thank you.
Please ask a question.
I don't want to ask a question, but I do want to say thank you for, not that you're writing your obituary here either, but your legacy for education. It is you who are, as a trailblazer, we see you throughout the years and say, that's who I want to be, and I'm glad that you're having a chance to slow down and maybe tip over on your rocking chair. So thank you for all your good work.
Slow down. I have to go back to work to get a rest. Somebody told me when you retire, you know, you can have all that time. No, I haven't. I have plans. I'm working on a book called From Teepee to Penthouse. My life experience as growing up, going to school and doing what I can. And also I'm planning to open up my native name is Frog Lady Makikwe. A little frog came to visit me in my Tikanagan when I was 2 months old, and my grandmother said her name will be Makikwe from now on. I carry that name and use it. I'm going to open up the Frog Lady Bannigan Tea House in Thunder Bay North soon, in about a year. And the third thing I'd like to see is do a workshop for Native parents that went through residential school. I'm a product of residential school. And one of the things that it didn't teach me was how to be a good parent. I provided everything for my children. The only thing is I quit hugging them when they were 2 years old. We were not allowed to touch, love, or hug each other. And so I quit touching them because I thought it would be immoral. And a couple of years ago, my 27-year-old granddaughter said, "Nanny, you never hugged me when I was little." And I said, "I did." "No, you didn't." She didn't remember. So I hug her now, and I hug my children. And I learned to hug when I set up the Native Studies program at McMaster. I found everybody hugged. Men hugged men. Men hugged women that weren't their wives or girlfriends. Women hugged each other, and it became a warm fuzzy. So when I want a warm fuzzy from you, I'll put my arms out and you give me a warm fuzzy. They're good to have. I learned a lot through life and through experience, but I learned a lot from my parents and grandparents who taught me the basic rules of life. Be good, always do good. Whatever you do will come back to you. Even negative things will come back to you, or it may come back to your children someday. So the various things that they taught us, and one of the things they taught us too is get an education. There's not going to be a life here for you. And this was the 60s. And at that time, Native men didn't have jobs except seasonal jobs on the reserve. And Mom says, girls, if you're not going to get an education, get married. Marry a white man. At least they got a job. Well, I didn't marry a white man. I married my childhood sweetheart from 5 years of age, and it was no picnic when we grew up. And so another thing too, they said get an education. I was the first to get a BA and MD, and out of 12 children, I'm the oldest. 7 of us got our degrees, and 6 of us got our master's degree. 4 of them went into social work. We all got jobs. They thought, if she can do it, so can I. And so they need role models, and that's what we should be as role models for our children. Any other comments or questions? As I would say to my brother, I didn't set the bag of neck. He says, "What, did you say I got a snot on my neck?" What is the time? 9:42? Yeah, wow. 3 minutes for any other comment? Question, anybody I taught here? Okay, some hands, okay, good. That's great. Come and say hello to me after. My vision isn't all that great either, so that's one of the things I lost after teaching is one eye went. I hope the other guy doesn't go. I need my eyes. Okay, any other comments, questions?
Well, if there's no more comments or questions for Dolores, on behalf of Chiefs Ontario, let's give a round of applause to Dolores.